Okay, 1. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. That's great. So my name is Dmitry Barinov. I'm CTO of a company called SecureKey. I have about 15 minutes, so I don't think I will be able to talk about everything what I can or should talk about, talking about how Hyperledger helped us to develop the system that we're right now operating live. But let me try. And we started with a notice that we have a lot of fraud in the identity markets, right? And there are lots of numbers on the impacts of fraud, right, on identity validation and identity proofing. So we really wanted to solve that problem. And they can either show why fraud is important through the boring pictures, or I can show something more fun, right? Because Dilbert is always fun. But it's well, like if your problem hits Dilbert cartoon, right? Well, that's probably important enough. So we came up with a system which is launched in Canada. It's called Verified Me, and the idea was to provide multiple identity bundles from various data providers to the data consumer, and to ensure that the citizen or user of the system, is a physical person, can always provide it with consent. So that was generic idea. How we came up with the name? Well, it was just because when I say trust but verify, so many people laugh, right? Verified Me was one of the chosen things. What we decided to do, we decided to basically work with a number of the well-established identity providers in the area, and to ensure that we establish the system where various identity claims from these established providers can be shared to various commercial or useful or public institutions. And one of the main ideas was to come up with a fairly streamlined use case and the flow, right, where the user would arrive at the reliant party side or data consumer side. The user would agree to follow through the process, for example, application process or identity proving process. Then the user would authenticate with a strong authentication source, and based on that authentication, a number of the identity claims associated with that user could be made either by authentication source or by other parties who trust authentication source, right? So in this scenario, I'm just sharing for example, the data from my bank, but I will show you that in current production system, we actually have a lot of other data providers who can kind of understand that, oh, well, if the bank believes this is Dmitry Barinov, we believe that's Dmitry Barinov as well, so we'll associate some data claim on that. Another important point was obviously that to ensure that the user can provide consent on the flow. And the system itself has very interesting features, such as user can see in the user agent transaction history. There is obviously a transaction trail. The data itself is invisible. So there were very interesting things that we have done. So we always have been looking into, so we started this about 4 years ago now. And now we started to create a number of very, very exciting commercial use cases for the system that, as I said, we are running in production. It has been officially launched in the summer of last year. So maybe a little bit about why did we choose Hyperledger, why we choose Hyperledger Fabric on which the system is run. Basically, what we wanted to do, we wanted to have a commercially scalable system, right? We always knew that we will have to run a very large volume of transactions. We wanted to ensure that the system that we will build on whatever technology platform we choose to use will have ability to provide the transaction indemnity, integrity of the transactions, that we're able to provide the verifiable, auditable transaction path. So in case of some disputes that could arise, we could get the resolution of these disputes. Another very important point was that we wanted to ensure that we can comply with strict privacy guidelines, because typically the identity sharing systems, many identity sharing systems, they can be weak on privacy, right? So what we built a system with the engineering principles of triple blind privacy, where data providers and data consumers can be completely blinded from each other, and where the operators of the network actually never see the data that passes through the network. Meaning that they might see the data that passes through the network, but the data passes encrypted, and they never see the keys with which data are encrypted. Right, so that's why we built everything in Hyperledger Fabric. Once again, the fact that we wanted to have this distributed ledger was probably one of the main choosing factors, right? The fact that we could write the chain code, and we could write a lot of logic into the smart contracts executed by the chain code was another very important point for us. And obviously the fact that it's an open source vendor kind of neutral platform, right, that can be provides certain assurances to the companies who adopt the platform, that's obviously very, very good too. So what we started with, right, we started with working with Canadian financial institutions. There's 7 financial institutions that we started to work with. The application is available on the network. From the data, from the partners who we have, right? So we have banks, we have actually quite a few insurance players. We are working with a number of governments in various POC projects right now. Healthcare is there, telcos are there right now in Canada, and so on. So what's next, right? So we are deploying in more geographies, right? We're going beyond Canada right now and applying it to various use cases. We started significant investment in interoperability associated with W3C standards, and I will be talking about this more tomorrow, about our work, how we're doing this. How we are working, how we're combining how we're contributing the code to Fabric and to Aries to make them compatible, right? So, and it in itself, that's probably a topic for the day, right? Not for the 15 minutes. So I will talk about that tomorrow. And if I still have a few minutes, which I do, I'll just show you a few of the demos, how it runs in production and what's happening. So this one is a simple demo, right? Once again, it's just production screen. So I want to apply for the Sun Life insurance. You can see that it's my recording, right? So it's not very beautiful. So I'm applying for Sun Life. I click on the register with Verified Me. It opens up Verified Me application. I'm already authenticated. I consented to share, which probably was too fast, right? Because I just wanted to run that fast. So here I consent to share. I click agree. I can review this request. If I wanted to, I can review the data that will be shared. I can review it either in my user agent or in the user agent or actually shared organization that will share the data in case the organization that shares the data does not want to show it in the user agent that I'm displaying. And I agree, and the data is transferred, right? So the data is transferred, encryption. So once again, this is completely production experience that users can choose right now. So in the end, I get redirected to verify to a Reliant party, and you can see that actually the data, my own data is provided there. Another interesting thing that I wanted to show you, and I think this video even is it's definitely available on our website, but I'll try to show you what it is. It explains basically the architecture of the system and how the whole fabric is involved in this. So I'll just start playing. So here, the fresh user just installed the Verified Me mobile application. Right now, we're tying that mobile application to the bank. Because the bank provides, once again, authentication factor, and it provides the root of trust in the system. It doesn't have to be the bank, but that's what the Canadian implementation looks like. So here I would choose the bank, and when the user chooses the bank, that's actually we start engaging the Verified Me network and Hyperledger Fabric network. So hopefully the video goes a little bit faster. Yeah, I should have started from this. So this one kind of shows the architecture, how the bank and they integrated into the verified me system. We are providing an adapter that is run by the financial institution that actually provides the integration to the Hyperledger Fabric ledger nodes, distributed nodes. We are registering the user on the network, and you can see what's happening on the left right there from the user agent perspective. We are, after we register a user on the network, the associated claims about the user registrations are written into the distributed ledger of the network. Certain claims are written in the private ledger that's just owned by this particular financial institution. And obviously there is some root of trust that is put on the user agent to identify, which is basically, it's not a cookie, of course, right? It's a great simplification to call it a cookie. But just to highlight to the user that he is registered with this particular financial institution, so he doesn't have to go through the registration process again, right? So when I'm using, this is actually what's happening. Here is the Rogers. Rogers is a telco. I want to register for the telco. Rogers, before I start executing the flow, basically has to register the request on the network. After the request is registered on the network, Rogers provides, or any reliant party provides basically the deep link, in this case informed with the QR code. And this deep link is provided to the user agent. User agent goes through the network to retrieve the request and decrypt requests from the network. We're eliminating a number of the phishing and other types of attacks on the user and on the commercial use of the system in that way. And basically after the user agent retrieves the request from the network, which will be there, the video has a voiceover, and that voiceover is done in a nicer words and without my terrible accent. But basically you can see that we get the request details, and the user agent decrypts the request, and then it displays what the request from the data consumer is. So we're using it this way. And then, so that's basically the display of the request. And you can see in this particular case, we're displaying the request from that the reliant party actually wants to get data from 3 different data providers, right? And once again, this is a commercially supported use case right now. And then basically what the user does, the user provides the consent in the user agent. That consent is interpreted by the chain code that we are running on top of the Hyperledger Fabric. And that's why we have this immutable list of the transactions on the Fabric, right? After the consent is done by the user, basically from the user perspective, he's done, right? And the data just being transferred through the side tree is topic for tomorrow, through the private channel on Fabric from the data provider to the data consumer. That's pretty much it. That's how it's done, yeah. So I ran out of my 15 minutes, but I do not see the next speaker, actually. So maybe the next speaker is not here. The floor is open for questions. Are you speaking at 2:30? Is it 30 minutes or 15?
30 minutes. The next speaker is
Okay, excellent. So we have 15 minutes for questions. I can answer any question you want. Just, yes. So this gentleman raised his hand first, please.
How have you motivated the companies like Rogers or the banks who are actually the personal information?
Yeah, so the different organizations, and let me just stop this, right, because this is just marketing pictures, which are beautiful, but maybe a little bit destructive. So the motivation is twofold, right? Obviously, some organizations want to participate in the identity networks, right? Like, for example, banks, financial institutions might feel that they're providing an extra care for the customer, right? Same as governments might feel like this is actually their obligation to issue the citizens' digital ID, right? So that's motivation number one. Motivation number 2 for the other data providers, right, such as, let's say, credit bureau, right? Credit bureau just wants to make money, and typically the data consumer or reliant party in this case would be able to, so there is a billing mechanism behind the network. The billing mechanism is based on the Fabric logic as well on the chain code logic which is executed on Fabric. And basically the data consumer in the end is billed for the data it received. And some of this billing, and there are different billing models. But the organizations who provide data, they either provide it as an enhanced service to the customer, or as a citizenship service, if they're governments, or just because this is a convenient way for them to share their data claim in a secure way.
You mentioned a talk tomorrow. Which talk is that?
So I'm talking tomorrow at, it's basically, I think the talk is called How Hyperledger, Fabric, and Aries Work Together, or something like that. And yeah, 4:45, excellent. See, Lynn knows actually what I'm doing and how. Please. Mm-hmm. Do I have configurations for these benchmarks? Yeah, I do. So let's be completely true to this, right? So when we started on Fabric, it was 0.6 version, right? So we went through a number of the iterations and a number of the improvements on Fabric, right? We actually worked together with IBM on some ideas how to improve the capacity and the throughput on Fabric as well. A lot of the configuration, and in the end, what we understood that our biggest success and the secret sauce, I mean, it's not secret, right? But our expertise is really on how we are able to productionalize a system like that. And was it easy? No, it wasn't easy from our perspective, right? It took literally years. And how to integrate various large organizations into the system, right? That's why we came up with the idea of the adapter. That's why we spent quite a bit of effort on productionalizing those adapters. These adapters are written in Go because we just had this environment, right? So how do we like a good how we Docker containerize these Go adapters that speak Fabric language on one side and normal RESTful API on another side. That's another one. We ran, so when I showed 10,000 TPS, right? 10,000 TPS is a fantastic number, right? It's great. Did we run the system to the 10,000 TPS? No, because we quite honestly are not deployed on the hardware that would run such volume, right? But we know how to scale, and we have deployed on, and by the way, I have no affiliation with IBM, right? IBM people are here in the building, maybe somebody's here in the room. But we ran the first version, we're running right now on IBP, which is IBM blockchain platform, which is the IBM production system. But we are going to migrate from IBP v1 to IBP v2. I think I'm using the right numbers there, which actually allows much more interesting deployment options as well. So we literally, we're a company of 100 people. We have probably 20 people who are running this operation right now. Yeah, from our next steps, yeah, I literally thought I had 15 minutes, right? I would speak otherwise very slowly. What we are doing next, we working, and once again, I will be talking about that tomorrow as well, but we will be working quite a bit on implementing of the interoperability standards. Basically, in the W3C, there are two main interoperability standards. One is called DID, another is called verifiable credential, VC, right? And this looks like a good way to interoperate with other networks that are associated with identity projects. So I will be once again talking a little bit more about that tomorrow and showing actually where we're running the projects on the GitHub. Right now, what we are doing, we are participating in the project with Department of Homeland Security here in the States with at least 4 other companies. And we're going to show the interop of Verified Me system based on the published W3C standards in end of April at IAW. If you know what IAW is, which stands for, my God, so exactly. I'm bad with abbreviations. Yes, please. Did we approach credit unions in Canada? So the short answer is yes. We talk to the credit unions in Canada. They offer, and I mean, I don't know if it's a problem or not, right? The issue with credit union, but once again, like I say these things, right? And they always wear my CTO gearhead hat on, right? Because I'm always afraid to say something offensive or not true, but here's how I see. So right now, we have a very similar project in Canada associated with Authentication Federation. Basically allows you to use your bank login to access the service of the government. We have about 16 million different Canadians using the system right now, which is a lot, right? Which is like an incredibly high number. Like I look at the number, sometimes I don't believe it, but it's actually true. And we know that these are unique identifiers. Pardon? 35, something like that. So, but I'll explain why I'm saying this, right? So we started with 3 banks. Right now, if you look at that NASCAR page, which has all the institutions you can log in with, it has 7 major banks, or 5 major banks plus 2 banks, right? Which, whatever, 7 banks that I've shown you. And it shows at least 10 credit unions, right? So credit unions join, and we expect that they will join. But they typically adopt into this large production integration infrastructure programs a little bit slower from our experience, right? And we're talking to a number of the consolidators of the credit unions, right? Because for credit unions, the major impact is how much you invest into the technology and what return they will have for their shareholders, I guess, right? Or members, that's the right name. So that's actually the main point, right? And many of them use some standard technology platforms, which if you are familiar with credit unions, you would know of, right? So we're working in Canada, we're working with 2 large groups of credit unions who might be able to join the organization. And we're also working with a software provider which is used by many, which would allow a faster adoption for them. Okay? Yes, Fabric and Aries, yes. Oh boy, so, well, we're based on Fabric, right? Like we're based on Fabric, we made a conscious choice, right? We believe it's an enterprise platform which is built once again for the enterprise use cases. And we will keep use Fabric for in the next releases of our product as well, technically. Aries is an interop bridge, right? As far as we are concerned. So we are once again using Aries as an interop bridge for the W3C because Aries is a W3C based. I am not that much up to date on where Indy is. Actually, one of the reasons I'm here, I want to hear this, right, where Indy is on W3C standards. The last time I heard, and I know there is a gentleman who might say that I'm right or wrong right here, but the last time I heard, Indy was a little bit late being up to date to the latest W3C standards. But once again, I would actually, is that a fair? And that was the last time I heard, which was in November.
No. The current Indy is not W3C verified credentials pending. That's Rich Scheme is adding.
Yeah, the verifiable credentials, the latest version of verified, because it's an evolving standard.
Yes, oh, absolutely. And by the way, the standards are not ready. So I will be the first one to stand up and say that the standards are not ready, and they will be there. But once again, the last time I heard, Indy was not, did not have that in the production version, right? Like I'm trying to.
Indy has about half of it in master now, and it's working on the other half after.
Yeah. So like everybody will catch up, right? So that's what it is. Okay. Any questions? Any more? Once again, we're here. We have a small stand upstairs, right? So during lunch, come over. Thank you.